Good afternoon. Welcome to our Sioux Falls City Council very short informational meeting today. We appreciate your attendance and your interest in our city government. I'm going to call our meeting to order and start with our City Council open discussion. Councilor Jameson.
Thank you. We've got a contract later tonight with Bill O'Toole with a company called LMI. And I just had some questions, and I thought it would be okay. And I asked council leadership and Bill O'Toole himself if he would be okay with coming today at 4 to just speak a little bit more about that project. At first glance, I think it would be hard for anybody to argue with the merits of the project, but it's very complicated and it's very intense. So I thought it just fair discussion for us to have, and per Bill, I'd appreciate I asked him a few questions by email, but if he could just update us a little bit more, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. O'Toole.
City Council, Bill O'Toole, Human Resources Director. Yes, on tonight's agenda, LMI is a not-for-profit strategic consulting firm that the city is seeking to engage professional services to conduct a citywide organizational assessment. And if I could boil it down into a kind of a short statement, what we're asking them to do is take a macro look at the City of Sioux Falls in its entirety for all city 12 departments and give us some recommendations on how we might be able to do a better job at what we do. By no means are we suggesting that there's anything wrong with the City of Sioux Falls. There are so many things going well, but as this council knows, this community has been growing at a pretty fast pace. And one of the things that we want to do is not only make sure that we're equipped and positioned for today, but that we're equipped and positioned for tomorrow as well. And I think that you've got to continually look at yourself and look at ways to improve. And really that's what we're asking them to do. And I think it's important to have somebody come in who is unbiased and can give you that professional services opinion about your organization. And really, it's probably something in terms of the scope of the project that would be done in two different phases. The first phase, that's the nature of this contract, of course, is all about just that 10,000-foot overview, that look at the City of Sioux Falls, and giving us some recommendations. We'll decide at the end of the project, which would take about 5 months to complete, which of those recommendations we think make sense for us as an organization. Maybe some do, maybe some don't, but that's what we're ultimately going to do. And without getting into too much detail, I know I did forward an email to the entire City Council to try to brief you a little bit about the project as well. And I'd like to spend my time, and maybe I'm more specific to some of the questions regarding the project.
Any specific questions?
Sure, Bill, I had some that I'd written you. I don't know if you want to answer those, or if you could. I could ask them if you want, but if you would, has a study like this ever been done in the city before?
It has not. In the 18 years that I've been with the City of Sioux Falls, we have not engaged in this kind of a service or analysis since I've been here. And I think the time is right to do it. Again, we've gone through a great deal of growth. And I think it's all about helping us ensure that we're ready for today and for tomorrow. And I think, the value of the contract is around $85,500. We don't take that lightly, but I do think that in terms of what we're asking this company to do and the scope of the project and the work that they're going to do over a 5-month period is significant. And we do think it's a worthwhile investment to pursue this endeavor to help us maybe get better as an organization as we're moving along. I know one of the questions you had, Councilor, had to do with municipal experience of this company. And through the process that we followed internally in interviewing this company, we asked them about that, and they provided us some examples of relevant municipal experience. The District of Columbia, New York City, Chicago, San Antonio, City of Falls Church, Virginia, and Fairfax County, Virginia. This is actually a pretty big company. I think they had about a little over $230 million in revenue last year, And one of the things that we think we realized in our discussions with them is we're probably a much smaller market than they're accustomed to dealing with. They're also very heavily involved in federal government and federal contracts as well. I think they're viewing us a little bit as an opportunity to get into a new market, but they understood very clearly the scope and the complexity of the project, what we're after, and it's one of the things that was kind of enticing for us to look at this organization and work with them. And again, at the end of the day, it's not a small amount of money. We don't take it lightly, but what we're asking them to do, we think it's a very reasonable and fair price for the project that we're asking them to perform. Some of the other questions you've had that you asked, Counselor, was what organizational changes have been discussed or implemented in the past. Quite frankly, we're in a constant state of reassessing whenever we have a vacancy at the City of Sioux Falls. We're always asking the departments, and they do a good job of it, and that is reassessing. Is that position the correct use at that time? Could it be used in a different way to serve us better over the long term? But what we haven't done, again, is we haven't had that kind of that look in the mirror, the entire organization as a whole. So we've done a lot of internal organizational reviews, usually by department, by division, probably not as much as what we're looking at here in terms of this, of its scope. Our objectives are in fact very clear. Our goal is that we want to ensure that the organization is properly structured and aligned in order to achieve maximum efficiency, productivity, effectiveness, and employee well-being while providing the highest customer service for the taxpayer. That's our goal. That's our vision for this project.
I could wrap it up, Bill. The last one that really kind of I think starts to hit home is if this group comes back with some, like any organization would do this, any large company has done this in the past and continue to do this all the time, and all of a sudden comes up with a major reorganization. And there's a lot of people who are impacted. That's very difficult. And I think over the last 18 years, the reason it hasn't been done is because the answers may be pretty difficult to swallow. I mean, it may mean merging departments. It may mean eliminating. It may mean outsourcing. Who knows? But there's a lot of things that could happen. And what I really wanted to get across as well at this time was to make sure that you get that. And what's coming to all of us could be very, very big. You talked about it as one of the biggest projects perhaps for the city to be addressing in the coming year. We need to understand that as well, because what we may have to do in the future is could be very difficult. And
Council, I think you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we're very cognizant of as we're approaching this project is a solid communication plan with our employees. We're obviously not going to jump the gun. Obviously, maybe some of them may see this discussion today, and that's fine. But until we get through tonight and deal with the agreement itself, we've got a communication plan in place where we're going to tell them about the project. They do need to understand what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And yes, we can understand and appreciate that there may be some level of anxiety with some of them, but I don't want to jump the gun too much. The beauty of the project is we're going to get a lot of recommendations. At the end of the day, we're going to decide which ones we think, again, make sense for us in the long term, and hopefully it would make sense to the employees as well, that if we are going to make change, that they'll understand why we're doing it, and it'll be part of that communication plan, and we want them to understand why we're doing that. One of the interesting things that Dr. Rosie Ward, who's a consultant who's working with us in our employee well-being initiative, said that change is difficult. Not changing is lethal. We want to stay ahead of the curve with our organization, and we think this is one of the ways that it can help us stay ahead of the curve and continue to stay on our game and serve the city very well into the future.
Councilor Erickson.
I know you just mentioned that the scope was city-focused only, but my question is if they will look at any of the potential changes to county, how we can streamline services and make that more effective and efficient, or is it more towards just employee department? What is the scope for that? Because I know that sometimes there's oftentimes concerns of city pays for this, county pays for this, and
right.
The scope of that, and if the city, is it only city or is the county being involved in this as well, I guess is kind of my question.
Yep, and I understand your question, Counselor, and it's a good one. The scope of this project is just internal to the City of Sioux Falls. That's how we pose the question for purposes of getting the fee schedule response. That obviously is an even larger discussion, if you will, than just looking at internally at the City of Sioux Falls. But for now, the scope is just internal to the city.
Councilor Rolfing?
Yeah, Bill, one question that I had, a couple of maybe. One is, what role is this body going to take in this study? And then when the study does come down, is there anything that we would be expected to do, or are there ordinance or resolutions or something that would be needed at that point?
Well, obviously, yeah, the first one, Councilor, will be tonight via the consent agenda for purposes of approving the expenditure of the dollars for the professional services agreement. We will certainly come back to this body to let you know the outcome of the study. As to whether or not there requires a resolution, I would almost have to defer to legal counsel if there's changes. I mean, and that's all speculative at this point because we don't know what they are. We don't know what the recommendations are. We're just studying.
Okay.
Councilor Jameson?
Well, first, thanks, Bill, for coming in. Thanks for the advance notice you gave us a long time ago. I think that's important for us to recognize that that's beneficial to us. So thank you for that. And as well, you mentioned that just because the study might recommend these certain changes, it's up to you and the administration, your group, to decide which ones you implement. Just because they recommend something isn't the end all.
Yeah, and yes, it needs to make sense to us as an organization and to the administration. You know, like I said, they could come out with 10 recommendations, and maybe we decide that there's 2 that make sense to us. And maybe all 10, but we'll assess that, and that's the beauty of this process, that we'll get to decide.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other City Council open discussion? Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Just quickly, after my brief presentation last week on the arterial road program, I spoke to a couple of the IRAB members, and they've requested to have that moved back to the IRAB group, which is where the actual original plan came from. I've spoken with Mark Cotter. They're going to do that before we look at it after the first of the year. So they should have some suggestions by then.
Thank you for your communication on that. Any other open discussion? Councilor Anderson.
Proposed executive session to consult with legal counsel about proposed or pending litigation or contractual matters pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2-3.
So we have a motion to move into executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We will then adjourn to executive session. The City Council will not come back. There's no fiscal committee meeting tonight. The council will re-adjourn at 7 o'clock for its normal City Council meeting.
Not adjourn. We'll reconvene, not
Reconvene? Okay, thank you.